Hey everyone, this is the latest update to my space shooter. So first things off the bat, you'll notice that the name has gotten longer. It now says Wave Attack, and part of the reasoning behind this is because this current version is a game jam submission, and the game jam entries are placed into this sort of arcade where all the entries are kind of organized by certain abstract categories like action. And when you just see the word Icarus, you don't really get an idea of what the game is. And so by adding the words wave attack, you get the feel that this is going to be some sort of combat-based game that's going to happen in waves. And then once you see the planets and the asteroid here, then you can kind of assume that it's a space shooter. And that's what I want people to assume before they even start the game, to have an idea of what they're about to get into. So right off the bat, you'll notice that the title screen has also changed. Previously, it would say press return to continue, and there would also be the keyboard controls down here. Now, in this version, I've added mobile support or touch-based controls, and so you'll be able to play this version on a mobile device, and that's why you see the screen here. Basically, what this is the game has to get the type of input that you'll be using before bringing you to the instruction screen, because the mobile controls are a little bit different. Well, actually, they're vastly different from the keyboard controls. And so here, if your first input is a touch on the screen, then the game will assume you're on some sort of mobile or touch-based device, and it'll set up the touch controls for you. Whereas if you press a key on the keyboard, the game will assume that you're playing on a laptop or a desktop, and it'll set up the keyboard controls. And so I'm going to go ahead and press a key, and we'll jump straight into the keyboard controls. So here are the keyboard controls, and unlike last time, you can now press any key to play instead of having to just press return. Most of the controls are exactly the same as last time. The arrows move the ship and space is the shoot. One difference is that the shift key is no longer used for shields. And there's two main reasons why I removed this. The first is because the shift key, when pressed 5 times repeatedly on a Windows machine, causes sticky keys to activate, or at least it prompts the user to activate sticky keys. And that can be kind of annoying. And the second major reason is because whenever I added mobile controls to this game, the shields, well, having manual activation of shields was just kind of awkward. On mobile devices, you mostly have two primary inputs because you're usually using your thumbs, and so having a third sort of button or input area just felt really awkward. And so I decided to remove manual activation of shields and instead just make the shields activate completely automatically. And this has actually done some things that players have been quite happy about. The previous version, I got some responses that the game was a little bit difficult. There was a bit of a learning curve, especially because not all space shooters, especially not multi-directional space shooters like this one, they don't all play the same. They don't have the same sort of handling. So players are going to have to take a little bit of time to get used to the general feel of the ship in this game, the controls and the responsiveness and all that. And so by having the shields activate automatically, they are given this amount of time. They're able to move around a bit. They're able to check out the different controls, fire a bit, and they're able to get a feel for the ship without taking damage. And this has really been good for players who accidentally press a key and jump straight into the game, and they're like, "Oh no, do I need to reload the page to see the instructions?" Or people playing on mobile who accidentally press the screen and pretty much just skip through the instructions without actually fully reading them. And so this allows people to just kind of get the controls through discovery. And it also decreased the difficulty of the first few waves so that when you get to the difficult later parts of the game and your shields are almost out, you've gotten a feel for the ship and you know how the game kind of plays. And so the game is more exciting later on anyway, and so it really feels like a natural progression. So in place of the press shift to activate shields, you'll see here it says collect debris to upgrade your ship. And this is a feature I've added in this version. Basically, enemy ships will leave debris when they're destroyed. Now you can collect this debris, and after a certain amount of collections, your ship will upgrade. And you'll be able to see the upgrade on screen. Whenever you collect enough, you'll get a notification saying new upgrade and what that upgrade is. Now, the top left of the screen, once we get into the game, you'll see that there's a counter up there that says next upgrade, and it has a number next to it. This is the amount of debris that you'll have to collect in order to get the next upgrade. And once you've maxed out on upgrades, this counter will change to say maximum upgrades. So that way you know that you've maxed out all possible upgrades for the ship. Now, before we jump into the game, I want to go ahead and go into some of or pretty much the mobile controls. Simply, I won't be able to show them to you here since I'm on a desktop, so I want to just kind of talk about them a bit. On mobile, the screen has an invisible line going straight down the middle. You can't see this line, but it's there. And this is because on mobile, the controls are basically split into two different sections. You have ship movement and ship firing. And so the second control, the ship firing, is also the ship direction. So on mobile, when you press somewhere on the left, a joystick will pop up, and you'll be able to move this joystick around, and the ship will follow that joystick. And so the left control is the ship movement. You control how the ship flies, like the actual positioning of the ship. Now when you press on the right side of the screen, you'll get another joystick, and this joystick controls the direction of the ship, and in particular the direction of firing. So when you're touching the right side of the screen, the ship will fire, and it will also point, or it will face the direction of wherever you're pointing in order to fire in that direction. Now this allows you to do some things that weren't possible in the previous version. For example, several people asked for the ability to strafe or fly sideways or fly backwards and fire. This is now possible because controls are isolated between ship movement and direction. And so now players will be able to move in one direction and fire in another. On keyboard, this is a little bit more limited because you have arrow keys as the primary movement and space to shoot. And so unlike on mobile where pressing left or right physically moves the ship left or right, on keyboard you can't really strafe sideways because arrow keys, or the left and right arrow keys, will just turn your ship. But you can fly backwards using keyboard controls, whereas previously pressing down on the arrow keys or pressing the down arrow key would just slow your ship down. So I've added this feature and a lot of people have been happy about it. They've kind of liked the general sort of gameplay with the ability to strafe. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the gameplay. You'll notice I turned the sound off. This is because I want to talk about some of the changes to the enemy AI and a minor change to the asteroids. So here we go. So right off the bat, you'll notice that the enemy fires a lot faster than it used to. It fired at a set rate, basically like every 0.3 seconds, and it was very predictable. Now you'll notice that the enemy fires at a much faster rate, and sometimes it has little gaps in its firing. And this is because the enemy will only fire if it thinks it has a decent or good shot. Another thing you'll notice that the enemy doesn't just run straight at you. It actually tries to kind of strafe around you. It flies toward you, but once it gets in a certain range, it starts to drift. And the reason behind this is because the previous version, where the enemies just ran straight at you, created a sort of gameplay where players would just kind of sit in one spot and they would just turn to face the enemy and fire. I wanted them to be a little bit more active, and so I've created it so that the enemies move around more. This forces you to actually fly around and try to avoid their fire, which is actually faster than yours now, and try to engage them more actively. You might have noticed previously that the enemy ship here actually destroyed the asteroid. This is something I've also added as well. Previously, the enemies would try to avoid the asteroids and just kind of go around them to get to the player. Now they'll turn and fire on asteroids if they don't have a good shot at the player. They'll still try to prioritize the player, but they will focus on asteroids if there isn't really a good chance to hit the player. Now, as you'll see on the top left, I removed the enemies remaining counter. I felt it was kind of obvious how many enemies are left in the game because you can literally see them on screen. And that's been replaced with the next upgrade counter that I described earlier. So I want to go ahead and actually show you the upgrades in this gameplay. So I'm I'm just going to go ahead and play the game just a little bit, and once I get all the upgrades, I'll talk about things a little bit further. So right there, I just picked up some debris, and you'll see it says debris salvaged, and that the next upgrade counter also went down. So right here, I'm flying backwards and firing. That's an example of strafing that a lot of players wanted um, to see actually in the previous version, but I wasn't able to add that. And as you'll notice, the enemies fire whenever they get within a certain range or whenever they have a good chance to fire, or at least when they think they have a good opportunity to hit you. And so by flying backwards and sometimes turning, you can mess with their ability to gauge a good shot. And so you can mess with their rate of fire by flying away from them while you continue to fire. So you might have seen it whenever I got that upgrade right there. The first upgrade is faster bullets, and this doesn't make your projectiles fly as fast as theirs, but it does make your projectiles fly faster, which means that they actually last longer, simply because of the way the projectiles are fading out. And so this actually allows you to engage a little bit more effectively when going head on. Now it's still pretty dangerous, as you see they're clumped up right here and they're just firing in a cluster. And that's still really dangerous, but because of my increased rate of fire, I'm able to cancel out a lot of their shots, whereas without this upgrade, it would have been pretty one-sided. Alright, so there's the second upgrade, double barrels. Now this allows you to take on clusters more effectively, especially when they all group up and they start firing in like a bunch of when they start firing a bunch of projectiles in a group, kind of like what you're seeing right here. Having the double barrels allows you to cancel out a lot of their shots. Now, this third upgrade is ship self-repair. And basically the way this works is if you don't take damage after a certain amount of time, your ship health will actually increase automatically. And it literally means damage whenever I say that, because if you have shields that are blocking some of the shots for you, that doesn't cancel out the ship's self-repair. So as long as I have shields absorbing shots, I'm still not taking damage, and the ship's self-repair will still kick in. So what you see here, the blue thing floating around, is something I wasn't entirely sure I'd be able to get to, and that's a power-up. Now, in the last video, I had these green H power-ups, and that's the health power-ups that increase your health by a slight amount. The blue power-ups actually recharge your shields all the way to maximum, and the power-ups are spawned when asteroids are destroyed completely. So as you'll notice, the asteroids split into chunks, but eventually they don't split anymore and they just get completely destroyed. And the asteroids spawn power-ups at pretty much a 2% chance. So whenever you destroy an asteroid, you have a 2% chance of getting a power-up. And this is in there because later on you may want to use the asteroids as cover, but you also have to make that decision of, do I need to recharge my shields, or do I need that health boost? And so should I destroy asteroids? And this really helps give a meaning to the asteroids compared to the previous version where they were just kind of like floating hindrances. But now there's actually a reason to destroy them. So what I have here is the last upgrade. You'll notice in the top left it says maximum upgrades, and that's side guns. This basically gives you the highest range of combat or capability, at least right now. The ability to hit targets without facing them or at pretty much a 45-degree angle means that, like in this example, I can engage this group in the top right here and still be hitting some of the ships in the I guess the southeast side or southeast of my ship. And it really helps in terms of progressing in the later levels when you're getting swarmed by ships from several different angles and several different directions. Having these guns allow you to cancel out shots that are coming at you at angles in which you previously couldn't hit. And so it really helps you stay alive longer. And that's pretty much it for this release. I hope to add more later on, and I'm actually hoping to eventually turn this into an iOS-based shooter. So please stay tuned.